Well, hello again, friends. I'm going to return to this, I think it's Paul Mason, Paul Mason's article. You wanted a multipolar world, you got chaos. And yeah, it's still worth going to the end of it because last video talking about this article, I got up to the kind of the middle of it. And my critique or my concern, where I feel uncomfortable, is when it becomes very, very obvious to me towards the end of the article that he's walking that fine line uh, between the status quo and actually having a position. Because we can all parrot the party line, and depending on our bubble, our echo chamber, we'll have a certain point of view. Very few of us bother to triangulate by using different echo chambers, different silos, different, bubbles in our social media feeds or in the media or in print, blogs, newspapers, books, whatever, whereby we can have many perspectives and then think about our intuitions, our assumptions, dig deeper, look at where the facts are, what the facts are, and what the reality of the situation is, depending on the context and how you look at it, either are conditioned to look at it or choose to look at it, motivated by ideology or education or religious outlook or whatever, your culture. It's hard for most of us to do that because we're not trained to slow down and think about things like that. We really have to kind of train ourselves in critical thinking and cognitive biases and reasoning and so on to be able to even think that that's valuable, because sometimes it's just more emotionally satisfying to parrot the party line, you know? Join a team and cheer. And some of us really love being hyper emotional about things. So if we're angry and upset and outraged, it kind of feels good. And also, we might have better things to do than think about anything going on in the Middle East or in Ukraine or some other parts of the world. And sometimes I think if you're like that, if you're a completely local trad person or whatever, and you don't read the news or read books, you're kind of lucky. I've said that before because you don't have to worry about this stuff. But I can't turn away, so I'm stuck with it. Anyway, it's still worth, I think, going over, so I'm going to be looking at the notes over here on the side. And later, if I need to, I'll put stuff up on the screen, but just try to make it a little quicker and more punchy. I don't know if I can. But anyway, he's the part where I ended last time. There was a what happens to their minds after a month of under bombardment of this severity would be uncharted territory for people of the Strip. Well, it's been a week or so since I put up this video. And of course, if you're looking at real images, current images of what's happening there, it's a nightmare. The bombardment, Israeli air power, and shelling is literally turning Gaza Strip into dust. Meanwhile, we have people in the Anglosphere saying that, you can't trust the numbers. Maybe only 500 people died. Well, it's ridiculous. It's so tragic that people fall for this stuff. One of the Israeli generals tweeted that we're issuing a warning via a tweet in English. Well, of course, they speak Arabic in the Gaza Strip, so I'm sure since they shut down all the communications in Gaza, they have some clever way of warning the people and telling them what to do. drop a pamphlet on their building before you blow it up? I don't know. But anyway, it's all out war for them, and they mean to destroy the whole place. So, yeah, what's going to happen? People don't feel good about it. There's even demonstrations in India now. Go figure. So, people fear they'll either be massacred or forcefully expelled to Egypt. Yep. So Hamas now either cements the loyalty of the population or its support collapses as a conquest of defeat. Well, yes and no, because you can, like I said last time, you go in there, kill everybody who's Hamas, plus 6,000 innocent civilians, plus 3,000 children, and the ideology isn't going to go away. Where's ISIS now? Where U.S. air power is shelling Syria now to deter support for Hamas, not Hamas, support for Hezbollah from Iran. And we're putting soldiers back in Iraq. So, you think you're out and they pull you back in. But America needs these kinds of wars because it's easier to destroy a state than to create one. So regime change wars are fast money, quarterly profits, while you destroy a country and then you walk away and leave a failed state in its wake. Look at Libya, look at Iraq, look at Afghanistan. That's the modus operandi, because creative destruction, the creative part is difficult. It's really hard and it's complex. But the destruction part for a country as powerful as the United States is easy. Just bomb the shit out of the place. Unless you have a foe that's able for you, like Russia and Ukraine right now, then it's harder. That's why I don't think there's going to be a war with China, because the United States isn't able for it. So it's going to be rhetoric and, sword waving and that kind of thing. And they're going to do business as usual because, it's more lucrative to do business with China at the moment than to wipe them out. I heard an interesting expert talking about Florence, Italy, and why countries didn't just go into Florence and take it over, since it was so rich and it was the center of the banking world back in the day, Renaissance. Well, the diplomats would go to Florence and they would see these big houses with these arched windows and light hallways with statues, Roman statues, and all this kind of these buildings that they thought were gone. That technology died with Rome. So how do you do this? And they just see the wealth and this civility. And, well, of course, it was a violent place, Machiavelli and all that. But they see how rich it is and prosperous it is and brilliant it is. They say, okay, we'll make a deal with you. We're not gonna fight you. We'll make a deal. You don't need to raise an army to fight us. We just want some educators, some of your scientists and so on, some of your engineers, some of your teachers. We want to trade with you and partake in this wealth and use some of your banking services. So it was easier to join them than to kill them. And I think that's what it's about in China, or will be. So anyway, but if Gaza's turned to rubble and dust and everybody's dead, and Greater Israel is taking shape at lightning speed, so the aircraft carrier, as John F. Kennedy said, is intact and able to police the Middle East for the United States. In perpetuity, it won't matter. America's still going to need somebody to beat up on. They can go back to Ukraine and focus on that, and that'll be great. But when the Ukraine thing is finally negotiated and finished, and believe me, it will finish like that. There's not going to be an all-out victory by Ukraine, I don't think. But what do I know? there'll be a deal made and so on and so forth. And we'll go back to this multipolar world that's taking shape. It won't be chaotic and full of genocide. There was enough chaos and genocide before, during the old world order, Pax Americana. So we'll see. But I was also looking at something that's interesting to compare and contrast this guy's mainstream parroting view is the philosopher John Gray. And he's written some great books. His newest book is The New Leviathans, Thoughts After Liberalism. I'm going to read that next after I finish my next book. And that should be interesting. His thoughts on multipolarity arise from his sense of realism, how people are, how they behave, how nations are. For example, he thinks Putin was wrong, but he also thinks Putin's not stupid, he's rational, he has a plan, so on and so forth. That's always been my position. He's not insane, he's not evil, he knows what he's doing. He wants to build Russian power and expand his influence, and call it what you will. So he is a threat to Europe in a way, but how are you going to deal with the threat? Are you going to trade and get gas and maintain Siemens in Germany and maintain German industry, or are you going to go to war and find yourself deindustrializing and wondering about putting coal plants back online or going back to nuclear power that you shut down? It's kind of ridiculous. What a waste of time. What a waste of energy. But anyway, that's what happens. So ultimately, you cannot hold 2 million people in an open air prison. And like I said before, it's not a prison, it's a ghetto. It's a camp, concentration camp. It hasn't been an open air prison for a long time. But anyhow, you go try to live there and tell me what you think. But I don't have anything against individual people in Israel or anywhere else in the world, but I think Netanyahu's a maniac. But anyway, that's my opinion, folks. Hate me for it if you will, but I can't look at what I'm seeing and not feel sick. I mean, literally. You know that old trope where you see a policeman walk into a crime scene and it's so horrific that he can't even hold it together, he or she, and they have to run out of the house or out of the room to the toilet and puke? Yeah, I wake up in the morning feeling like that. I just can hardly look at it anymore. But you can't look away either. You can't look away and ignore it because it's happening to people. And it might happen to you someday. And it's very complicated. Peacekeeping is complex and hard. And interfering with countries when they're committing genocide is hard. That's what happened in Bosnia. And Rwanda and so on. It's really hard. Cambodia. But sometimes you have to do something if you really think that you care about some kind of universal human values. You don't have to say that humanity is a universal project and we're all going to become the same all of a sudden. That's not it. The idea is that there are some things that all human beings kind of can agree on. We shit, we piss, we sleep, we fuck, we eat. And there may be some more profound things that we can agree on about human rights and freedom of speech and property rights and other things. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You say, how can we improve things here a little bit? I'm going to dial that down a bit and continue what's good in our world while we maintain our differences, in certain ways. But I think we can all agree on certain things, like how to send a rocket to the moon. I don't think you need to be Chinese or from the Anglosphere to figure that out, or from Russia. Rocket science is rocket science. Some things are more complex than that, like culture and biology. So anyway, The very impossibility of these outcomes shows why we need an internationally mediated peace alongside a functional two-state solution, which allows the people of Gaza to live in peace, exercise democracy, and travel cross borders. Yeah, parrot it, repeat it ad nauseum by everybody in the status quo because they have no imagination. Can't imagine people in the region just living together in a democracy. You have to bring race into it. You have to bring language into it. You have to bring religion into it. You have to bring all these, the history and the context. It's not good enough to just say a one-state solution. So the two-state thing has been on the table forever, and look what's happening. How does it get done? We need a two-state solution, and I need $2 million because I want to make a movie. Whatever. If Netanyahu's endgame is a revenge fantasy of flattening Gaza and pushing its inhabitants into the desert, that's not an endgame at all. Only the casus belli for a regional war. Absolutely. And this is where we get to the bounce the rubble thing. You have Senator Tom Cotton going on television and saying, as far as I'm concerned, you can bounce the rubble, which means kill everything that moves.
Cut off a humanitarian crisis and destruction there.
Shannon, as far as I'm concerned, Israel can bounce the rubble in Gaza. Anything that happens in Gaza is the responsibility of Hamas. Hamas killed women and children in Israel last weekend. If women and children die in Gaza, it will be because Hamas is using them as human shields, because they're not currently allowing them to evacuate, as Israel has asked them to do so. Gaza is the responsibility of Hamas. And if Hamas uses schools and kindergartens and mosques for military purposes, Israel has every right under the laws of war to strike back. And it is Hamas that's committing war crimes by using those civilians to create the imagery to try to put pressure on the Biden administration, to cave, to not do what President Biden says he's going to do in Ukraine, which is to back them for as long as it takes. If we can back Ukraine for as long as it takes, surely we can back Israel for as long as it takes.
In Gaza, that's disgusting. I can't believe a human being can go on television and say that with a straight face and be considered a leader. I mean, his mentality is so damn shallow. It's as shallow as spit on Arizona asphalt in the summertime. Midday. It evaporates quickly, but it lingers in the hearts and minds of people who have to listen to that bullshit. The Gaza crisis is the latest example of how the Russia-Chinese multipolar world project works in practice. It doesn't matter whether there is a chain of command that goes Moscow, Tehran, Hamas. There is a chain of understanding, seize every opportunity to militarize all conflict, exploit every unexpected breakthrough, make all violence symbolic, weaponize the information space, and push conflict into the heartlands of imperialism. Well, who's been doing that for 100 years? And particularly since after World War II. Does that not sound a little familiar? Do you not think the propaganda machine with all the acronyms, the NSA and the CIA and all the different security agencies we have in the United States, high technology, Silicon Valley, great tech companies in Israel and across the world that we collaborate with, surveillance technology, surveillance capitalism, data capitalism with Google and Facebook and everything. Do you not think we invented that game? And that other people aren't going to play it as well? You know, you spy on Angela Merkel. Well, that's okay. She'll understand. We're doing exactly that. And this guy thinks a multipolar world would be chaos, violence, genocide. I think he's just pandering because he wants to keep his status, his position. He doesn't want to get canceled. I understand that. I really do. I get it, Mr. Mason. That's okay. Or maybe this is your real opinion. Have you really thought about it much? Both Russian and pro-China proxies networks have created media outlets, money, content, and social media amplification system for the BRICS ideology. Okay, so the Russians got Trump elected, that whole thing. Money, media outlets, Voice of America, CNN. Oh, come on, man. Who are you talking about? BRICS ideology. What about neoliberalism and neocon and all the crap that goes around? What about Trumpism, for God's sakes? And the reactionary populism of the United States. I mean, come on. There's a whole machine behind that, and it's rich and powerful. The corporations that invest in the machine to keep their positions, not necessarily because they have some ideological joy of doing it. They just want to maintain power, are incredibly powerful corporations with a lot to gain. That everything that disorganizes the rules-based order is progressive, even when carried out by reactionary political forces. See what I mean? So anything that's criticizes the so-called rules-based order, come on, define that one for me, is somehow a progressive thing. You know, it's funny they're not even using neo-Marxism anymore. That's stale now. So we have to talk about progressives. Oh my God, and the rules they're going, anything going against the rules-based order is great. Well, I understand that woke stuff, and it is a nightmare. Some of them misreading and misunderstanding of postmodern philosophy, but come on. So Palestinian solidarity movements that which were generally aligned with Fatah suddenly moving in the direction of overtly celebrating Hamas terror. I don't think anybody celebrates Hamas terror. They may have arguments of why Hamas is a legitimate political organization. And obviously elements of that organization are corrupt, violent terrorists. But people out on the streets in India are not celebrating Hamas terrorism, okay? And it's a dumb argument to say that if you criticize Israel, you are, by default, celebrating Hamas terrorism. That's nonsense. Please learn how to think. And don't write an article saying you're logical and then have these fallacious arguments. It's just so stupid. Alongside it, there's a mixture of Islamism plus decolonialization, decolonialism, agenda of postmodernist academia. So yeah, there are elements of that in there, but they're tiny compared to the big machine and to world opinion. And Islamist plus decolonial, yeah, maybe there's some decolonialization ideas out there because, you know, imperialism and colonialism is a thing, historically so, factually so. And you can think about it in different ways, have different assumptions and priors about it and beliefs about it, but it's there and people do react to it. But there's not this agenda. And even in academia, yeah, some of it's really grotesque, I have to admit. But it's not as pernicious as you might think, even though, yeah, Jimmy was a real nice boy before he went off to college. And he came back, I didn't even recognize him. He doesn't even think like us anymore. Well, yes, that can happen. People can change and grow when new ideas come into their head, but it's not all poison. You have to know how to think about it. So he's saying, everybody's saying gas the Jews and what's not. That's just bullshit. And if you've watched this for the last 2 weeks, come on. Yeah, there are assholes out there that say things like that, and they're idiots. But that's not the general tenor of people who are supporting victims of bombing, relentless bombing of Gaza. These people are sympathetic with innocent people, with children, with people just suffering horrifically. What they're missing were the masses. The conflict is there, and the danger is that it turns up into a big mass thing. So there's a fusion between far left and far right politics. No, there isn't. That's not what this is about. And obviously, far left, far right, centrist, whatever, Trump people, whoever you are, new French right, you're gonna co-opt this horrible event to make arguments for your side. That's what we do. But there isn't some big mass movement like that. Oh, let's get together, Black Lives Matter, and what's the guys, the there's a couple of these groups in the States, the something boy, Proud Boys, and we're lockstep now because of Palestine. It's not happening. I don't know if that's what he means, but come on. It's not being anti-woke or apologizing for colonialism. It means teaching people that a cocktail of anti-humanism, anti-universalism, anti-rationality is a route to excusing the totalitarian states in Russia and China, and now the geopolitical actions of their proxies. This is why I really want you to go and look at YouTube or wherever, search engines, and look at John Gray, his work. It dovetails really beautifully into this thing. Anti-humanism, I don't think so. Anti-universalism, I don't know about that. And how well has universalism fared, depending on how you define it? And we can define it. I can throw a definition up on the screen for you. But the end of history, Fukuyama, and so on and so forth, it's not necessarily working out that way. And as we move into a world of true scarcity, where we're way beyond peak oil and gas, and we're really trying to mine the world for whatever the next thing is, and we're having problems with the climate and whatnot. Whoa, it's getting so bright here. We suddenly really are at each other's throats to get a potato or whatever. These things could happen to us because we're not focusing collectively around the world on the real existential risks that we face. Instead, we're all about these stupid wars generated by really shallow ideologies and grotesque, greedy men. Just criminals in my book. So no, I don't think so. And I don't think it's all about their genocidal actions. Man, people really need to look up genocide. I mean, go to the United Nations website and do your own research or whatever. Harvard students groups saying they hold Israel regime entirely responsible for all the unfolding violence. Well, they are partly responsible, and I don't think that's the right way to characterize their position, but you have to read that for yourself and decide. I don't see the hyperlinks here for that kind of thing, but here's a quote. "The coming days will require a firm stand against colonial retaliation. We call on the Harvard community to take action to stop the ongoing annihilation of Palestinians." I don't know, man. You can take out the colonial word if that bothers you, if that's a bugaboo thing. Like, what the heck's wrong with colonialism, man? Why do you keep bringing that up? It's driving me crazy. And just say, we call for the stop to annihilating all the Palestinian people. I mean, a ceasefire, whatever. Is it really that crazy? And can you understand that some not too stupid people at Harvard might feel that way? That compassion and empathy might still be a thing, even in the halls of the Ivy League, where they train clerks to be players in the game, the great game? The players in the great game were young idealists once. They were protopian. They thought the world would get better. And now you interview people around the world and they say, we understand that things won't be as good for us as they were for our parents. We get it. So we're trying to figure out how we're going to live in the new world. We're not going to have all the stuff that they had. We're not going to have all the fun that they had. Yeah, so isn't that sad? But it's true, and you're going to have to figure it out. It's unfortunate, but true, and you will have to figure it out. So the apartheid regime is only to blame. Palestinians exist. So this quote, "The apartheid regime is the only one to blame. Israeli violence has structured every aspect of Palestinian existence for 75 years." Well, instead of strawmanning that, just using that quote to say, aren't they exaggerating? Aren't they hyperbolic? You might want to just look at the history of it and understand that there is action-reaction. You throw a punch, I throw a punch. And depending on the power dynamic, and there is one guy gets beat up worse than the other guy. And it continues for whatever reasons. You might have good reasons as a Zionist to want to do that, the Greater Israel Project, and you don't want to say it out loud because you have to maintain this connection with the United States and the American people, not just the government. But you know, it's there. This, of course, is a direct echo of pro-Kremlin propaganda over Ukraine. Propaganda, 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 propaganda. Oh, you'll just love telling lies all the time. He loves to lie and lie. Where NATO aggression is the only thing to blame for Russia. I wish he'd stop doing that. This is where I really get frustrated, because it's kind of a straw man over and over again, characterizing the arguments like that. Yes, NATO is part of the equation that when Putin wrote his 4,000-word text about reasons for, his incursion, limited action in Ukraine that's turned into a war like World War I, trench warfare. But yeah, NATO's part of it, of course. That dynamic is there. America didn't want Germany and Russia being happy. It makes sense from a game theoretic point of view, so it's not a big stretch. You don't have to mischaracterize people's arguments. Argue in good faith, and you'll learn something. Argue to discover, and you'll learn something. You might even update your prior opinions and beliefs in the process, and it might be a good thing. And if you're right, you're right. Israel's responsible for everything, blah, blah, blah. He keeps strawmanning that thing. Black September and Yasser Arafat and Leila Khaled. It's like, but honestly, from the American point of view, Israel can do no wrong. And thus, they get all the support in the world. They get billions of dollars every single year from the United States, just handed to them. Preferential treatment across the board all the time. So you don't have to feel too sorry for them. And lots of people are trying to put Netanyahu, Israelis, in jail. But now he's the dictator of Israel, so go figure. Yeah, Black September, not so good. Not a really good strategy for winning hearts and minds. Hijacking airplanes and killing Olympic athletes. Really stupid, really wrong. But, Israel has carte blanche to run around the world assassinating people anyway. And you can say, well, look, the Holocaust happened. Okay, I get it. But these the conversations are nuanced and complex. And if you don't want to go there, maybe you don't want to parrot this stuff, thinking it makes you look like a what? An intellectual or a journalist or something. I want to be charitable. I don't know the person, and who am I anyway? But it really bothers me because I see these arguments, this kind of rhetoric and conversation happening all the time, and it really bugs me. So yeah, I'm totally off Sam Harris now. I'm never going to listen to any of his content again. He's so stubborn in his opinions, and his voice isn't that interesting. And there's so many more great interviewers out there on the tubes and blogs and newspapers to listen to. So it's a waste of time for me. I'm moving on to some other people. The logical implication is that Palestinians have no agency whatsoever. Nobody said that. That's just dumb. Why make these hyperbolic, exaggerated statements. So our task on the democratic and internationalist left, so I don't know what he is in terms of internationalist left. What kind of left? What kind of internationalism? Is it the end of history type or what? Is, is he an apologist for true left something, or is he an apologist for neoliberalism? Because Europe now is just a neoliberal grouping of states. It's been totally co-opted by the U.S., period. So it will live and die as the United States lives and dies. So we better hope in Europe that whatever's next in terms of the reactionary right or America's leadership, which I think is totally idiotic, is going to be okay, I guess. Whew. So learning to use formal logic might be a start. I think his logic is really very childish, to be honest. And what does formal logic have to do with it? You can be as logical as you want to be and still be wrong about things. Having a logical argument doesn't make you ethically, morally superior, and it doesn't make you a better arbiter or commentator on reality. Accepting, as Marx says, that history is nothing but people pursuing their aims. That's not exactly what Marx says, but in a certain context, he's saying that. Regardless of how oppression structures their behavior, might be a second. Reference to some basic shared ethical principles might be a third. Sure, I'm all for figuring out. It's like Grace talks about. There's reality in terms of how people behave, and leaders behave, and powerful people behave, and so on. And then there are principles and ethics and values and things that perhaps we can share internationally across cultures. And wouldn't that be nice if we could figure those out and kind of have a gentleman's handshake on it and all that? But it doesn't mean that everything is going to be Disneyland and Hollywood. So for Putin, there's no single human civilization, only civilizations, which must be rooted in ethnicity, establish their own coexistence through the survival of the fittest. I've read Alexander Dugin. I understand that perspective of this and the New Right, French philosophers. But he's not saying that exactly. And so to exaggerate it and come up with this version of it is not helpful. It's better to know exactly what the other side is thinking if you're going to be a game theoretic player and play to win. Because pretending like you understand them when you don't, when it's really your biases and prejudices getting in the way of clear thinking and understanding, does not create a good player or a winner in my book. That's why we have all these idiots as so-called leaders in our world today. And unfortunately, people don't know how to stand up to them and how to organize with their friends and figure out how to think about things and, decide what they might want to pursue in terms of convincing or persuading their representatives to do what they want. So democracy, maybe not. When you talk about autocracies and dictatorships and other things, Curtis Yarvin's type of monarchy and so on, sometimes that works better in certain situations, times and places with certain people. But it's a reality. It's happened before, which means it can happen again. By definition, if something's happened, it's possible because it's happened. So there are many civilizations and none is superior or inferior to another. They are equal since each civilization represents a unique expression of its own culture, tradition, and aspirations of its people. So that's in a quote. And somehow that's a bad thing. This reminds me of people who just think that, because people still immigrate to the United States, it means the U.S. is the best of all possible worlds. Everybody wants to be an American after all. I mean, if you really think about it, dig deep. I know you're from Botswana or from Denmark, but really think deep, reflect, interrogate yourself. You want to be an American, right? I don't think so. Some people are very happy being Japanese or Korean, South Korean or whatever, and they like their culture. And there are limits to the kind of Americanization that their culture will swallow. It's not going to go all the way. Drink deep or taste not the Western Spring, an old Chinese saying. They're not going to drink deep. They're just going to say, I kind of like it the way things are with my thing. But that having been said, even if you go to Mali, you'll see people going, the kids and with videotaping things with their iPhones and acting cool and wearing a T-shirt that says something stupid on it. And, even the most, Berber Bedouin tribes are Americanized to a certain degree. They've been infected by modernism and modern culture and so on. I don't have anything per se against modernism, but we can't exaggerate its benefits or utility. And we're probably headed towards a more simple way of life because we're going to wreck our ecosystem. And it's going to force us into that situation. Not that we want, we all want to live in these George Jetson's house with all the latest technology, everything's sustainable, people are happy and doing what they want. And that'd be great, but I don't think we're going to get there because we keep making the same stupid mistakes over and over again. Because we're about money, capital and capital returns. We're about quick buck and not about other values. Unfortunately, powerful people are people who kick ass and take names. And if you want to be a player, you're going to have to make a lot of money. And you're going to have to be competitive. That's a fact. And if that's what you want to do, do it. And I hope that you're good at what you do, and I hope that you do something good with the power that you get. But a lot of people don't. It's never enough. They're going to want more. And at the end of the day, when they have everything, all they want is control. And they drink their own Kool-Aid way beyond Dunning-Kruger. They become narcissists, and they start thinking that everything in their brain is perfect because they're winners. And they're not. It's hard to be humble. And it's also hard to learn something when your salary depends on you're not learning it. The common assumptions are disdain for universalism, scorn for international law and human rights, repudiation of the Enlightenment, and thus liberalism, social democracy, humanistic Marxism, and anarchism. What? And worship of any totalitarian government that delivers economic development. Oh, so China is a totalitarian government that delivered some development. So I lived in China for many years, Beijing, Shanghai, Hong Kong. I didn't see a whole bunch of people that were just miserable about their life getting better. Not to say it's perfect over there, okay? I'm not saying that. But, it wasn't a bad place at all to live and work and do things. I don't know what he's talking about, humanistic Marxism and anarchism. I don't know why he throws all that in there. But yeah, even China has law, rules. Even North Korea does. And they're in the WTO and whatnot. Whatever. They're in the United Nations. They play by rules. They have to. They trade. We buy Chinese shit day in and day out. And it was the labor arbitrage game that took the capitalists to China. They don't care about your job. In Nebraska, they don't give a shit about what you're doing in England. They want to increase their profits. That's their mandate. That's their remit, is to return money to their shareholders. The game, the logic, the system's logic you can learn about. You don't have to be bereft of that knowledge. It's not that hard to learn about. So he says this is the modern incarnation of Stalinism. It has no problem seeing fascists like Hamas as the agent of progress. Well, he wrote a book on fascism, so I hope he understands the definition and doesn't broaden it too much. Because we tend to point our finger at people we don't like and say, you're a fascist. People can point to Netanyahu and say he has fascist tendencies, and so on and so on. It's just a complete waste of time to use this kind of inflammatory and exaggerated language. It isn't Stalinism, dude. Look at the context and understand you wrote a book on fascism, for God's sake. And now you're just calling everybody willy-nilly fascists. We do that. Christian fascists and, even Christopher Hedges does it. Chris Hedges and so on. I mean, yeah, but let's try to keep the definition clear and concise if we can. There's much soul searching today, especially in the US media, about why so many on the left and in academia have thoughtlessly cheered on mass murder. And then he has to go to Ukraine and make that comparison. And it's not the same thing, not even by any. There's no way to compare it. So one camp, he said, is a theology. This is typical. Right-wingers love to do this. Scientism. Science is just a religion, dude. You have faith in science, like I have faith in our Lord Jesus Christ, our Savior. No, it's not. They're just true believers. I know reality because I parrot MSNBC or something. It's really bad language. The second recognizes its debt to liberalism and wants to make universalism consistent. Well, people are pushing back on that all over the place. I hate to tell you. And what do you mean by liberalism? Where do you put that in historical context? What kind of liberalism? And put a link there. Yeah, go ahead. First claims international law is a sham. No. People play by the rules. They can't trade without doing that. That's why we have the banking system set up the way it is, and the dollar being, the currency of trade and oil and whatnot, and all that. The second knows that though the institutions of the rules-based order are flawed, they are better than chaos. So if you don't have this particular kind of rules-based order, you have chaos. So let's forget about everything in the middle or any other thing on the three-dimensional graph and just say it's either my way or chaos. So you're either my kind of American apologist for the status quo, or you just want genocide and chaos. It's really dumb language and it bugs me. I wish you wouldn't do it. So getting to the end finally, thank God. The entire Palestinian project of a state has, since 1967, relied on resolutions passed in the United Nations and on international law. In short, on the multilateral rules-based order. But who gets to break the rules? Powerful people get to break the rules. Powerful nations get to break the rules. Powerful nations get to veto anything they want to veto. If America doesn't want a pause in the bombing in Gaza, and the rest of the world does, if hundreds of nations vote for it, and the U.S. vetoes it, so much for that. And the U.S. breaks the rules all the time. U.S. banking corporations and corporations break the rules. We code the rules. We code the capital. We have the suits. We have vicious legal battles all the time. Supreme Court doesn't matter, really. The rule of law, I mean, government doesn't matter. It's all about, going to court. You have to have capital to go and fight and make the laws and so on, and then you can break the rules. Those who advocate a multipolar world without treaties, laws, and norms of state behavior need to understand how perilous such a world would be for the people of Gaza. Oh man, Gaza's fucked anyway. It was FUBAR way, way before October. And I'm telling you, no treaties, no laws, no norms. Nobody says that. Nobody. There may be some countries like Libya that right now are pretty chaotic and messed up because Blair decided he had to get rid of Gaddafi for whatever reason. And it created a failed state. But yeah, the West has some responsibility for what Libya is now. You can't just take yourself out of the picture. And you can't go back and do your counterfactual history and say, well, what if Blair didn't do it? And what if Hillary Clinton didn't say we saw, he's dead? Then what would have happened? Gaddafi would have been mean, and his kids would have had orgies and invited, pop stars, Foo Fighters to Libya to do concerts for their rich friends, and it would have been terrible. What did we do for people in Iraq when we backed Iraq against Iran during that war? Oh boy. Those who advocate a multipolar world don't want anything. Law. Here's the end finally. Those flaunting their joy at the murder of Israeli civilians need to understand the license this creates in the minds of right-wing ethno-nationalists in our own society. What Hamas did to the kids of Kfar Azar, the far right wants to do to you. So now you have to stoke up the fear. So first of all, everybody cares about what happened to innocent Israelis. No, nobody I know celebrated any of that murder. So that's stupid. That's a idiotic exaggeration. And suddenly we have to fear the right-wing ethno-nationalists, right? That's what they're going to do to you. So I don't know what he means. So who do we bomb in the United States? Who does the United States bomb in the United States? MAGA people? Do we put them in a ghetto somewhere in Texas and starve them to death and then bomb them, bounce the rubble? I don't know. What Hamas did to the blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, he ends with the perfect tightrope flip. He does a backflip on the tightrope over the Grand Canyon and nails it. He says, "Solidarity to all my friends in Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank." So he's a cool guy. He wants all of us to be happy in the international order that somehow is there at the end of history. And, everybody gets Disneyland and the right rules based on coded capital by greedy motherfuckers in the United States and the Anglosphere. And they can do no wrong. Get your iPhone 29.7 today. It's going to make you smarter. Okay, that's all for now. Bulliam T. Out.